Ibn Khaldun is not a name most people recognize today. He did not command armies. He did not rule an empire. He did not invent machines or discover continents. And yet, more than 600 years ago, he explained why nations rise, why they grow rich, and why they almost always collapse the same way in the end. What makes his work unsettling is not how old it is, but how familiar it feels. Ibn Khaldun lived in the 14th century in a world of kingdoms, caravans, and empires constantly rising and falling. He watched dynasties appear strong, grow wealthy, and then slowly decay from the inside. Most historians describe these collapses as bad luck, weak rulers, or moral failure. Ibn Khaldun disagreed. He believed collapse followed patterns, and patterns meant causes. His most famous idea was simple but dangerous. Nations do not fall because people stop working. They fall because incentives stop working. At the beginning of every successful state, Ibn Khaldun observed the same conditions. Taxes were low, rules were simple, people were rewarded for effort. Farmers kept most of what they produced, merchants were encouraged to trade, craftsmen were respected. The state took little but gained much because people were motivated to create. This was not kindness, it was strategy. When people believe their work will benefit them, they work harder, production rises, trade expands, wealth grows naturally. The state becomes stronger without needing to force anything. Ibn Khaldun believed this phase was driven by energy, discipline, and shared purpose. He called this force asabiyya, social cohesion, a sense that effort mattered and sacrifice had meaning. It was strongest when societies were young and weak because survival required cooperation, but success carried a hidden danger. As states grew richer, rulers grew comfortable. Palaces replaced tents, luxury replaced discipline. Government expanded, armies grew, bureaucracies multiplied, and all of it required money. That's when taxation began to change. At first, rulers raised taxes slightly. The increase seemed reasonable. The state needed revenue to maintain order, fund defense, and support administration. People paid because the burden was still manageable. But over time, spending always rose faster than discipline. More officials needed salaries, more soldiers needed pay, more luxuries needed funding. When rulers refused to reduce their lifestyle, they turned to the easiest solution: higher taxes. Ibn Khaldun noticed something crucial at this stage. Higher taxes did not increase revenue for long. Instead, they changed behavior. Farmers planted less, merchants hid profits, traders avoided markets. Skilled people left for places with lower burdens. Work continued, but motivation disappeared. Production slowed quietly, not dramatically. This was the beginning of decline. To rulers, the problem looked like disobedience. To Ibn Khaldun, it was simple economics. When people keep less of what they earn, effort stops making sense. When effort stops making sense, wealth dries up. The state responded the only way it knew. It raised taxes again. This is where Ibn Khaldun's insight becomes uncomfortable even today. He explained that declining revenue pushes governments to increase taxes further, not reduce them. Each increase weakens incentives more. Each weakening forces the state to squeeze harder. What begins as a fiscal problem becomes a vicious cycle. Eventually, taxes become so heavy that economic activity collapses, not suddenly, but steadily. Markets empty, skills disappear, innovation dies. The state looks powerful on paper, but hollow in reality. Ibn Khaldun believed this pattern was not a mistake, it was structural. Power naturally tries to preserve itself, but preservation through extraction destroys the source of power itself. He wrote that at the start of a dynasty, taxes are low and revenue is high. At the end of a dynasty, taxes are high and revenue is low. This was not a moral judgment, it was observation. Empires did not fall because enemies were stronger. They fell because their own systems stopped rewarding productive behavior. Another key idea Ibn Khaldun understood was that governments do not create wealth, they depend on it. Wealth comes from labor, trade, and production. When the state forgets this and treats wealth as something it can endlessly extract, it begins to consume its own foundation. He also warned about overregulation. As states aged, rulers tried to control prices, professions, and markets to stabilize declining revenue. These controls made things worse. They reduced flexibility, discouraged risk, and pushed economic activity into the shadows. Instead of fixing the problem, the state strangled what little vitality remained. Ibn Khaldun did not believe corruption was only about dishonest officials. He believed corruption was built into systems that removed incentives. When rules punish effort and reward position, corruption becomes rational behavior. People stop competing through skill and start competing for access. Power replaces productivity. Influence replaces innovation. And once that shift happens, decline accelerates. One of his most striking insights was that collapse happens often slowly enough that people don't notice it. Life continues, institutions remain, titles stay the same, but the economic engine weakens year by year. By the time rulers realize something is wrong, they mistake the symptom for the cause. They see falling revenue and assume taxes are too low. They raise them again. Ibn Khaldun believed this mistake doomed countless empires. He also understood that financial decline destroys social trust. When people feel the system is unfair, loyalty fades. Asabiya weakens. Citizens stop identifying with the state and begin seeing it as an extractor rather than a protector. At that point, the state survives only through force. And force is expensive, which requires more taxation, which weakens incentives further. The cycle closes. What makes Ibn Khaldun remarkable is that he wrote all of this centuries before modern economics existed. He described incentive theory, tax efficiency, and institutional decay without equations, charts, or models. He observed human behavior and followed it to its logical conclusion. Modern economists later rediscovered parts of his thinking. The idea that lower taxes can increase revenue at certain stages became famous under different names. But Ibn Khaldun understood it as part of a larger life cycle of states, not a single policy trick. He believed no empire escapes this pattern permanently. What matters is how long a society can delay the final phase by maintaining incentives, discipline, and balance. Once luxury replaces purpose and extraction replaces encouragement, decline is inevitable. Ibn Khaldun did not argue for no taxes or no government. He argued for proportion. Taxes should support society, not drain it. The state should protect production, not compete with it. When that balance is lost, collapse is not dramatic. It is administrative, financial, quiet. Empires fall not when the treasury is empty, but when people no longer believe effort is worth it. That is why Ibn Khaldun still matters, not because he predicted specific events, but because he explained a pattern that repeats whenever power forgets what creates wealth. Incentives build nations. And when incentives die, nations follow.